WB's W5. Here is Lloyd Robertson.
Welcome to W5. This week, a stunning medical discovery, a revolutionary treatment for a most debilitating disease. It is multiple sclerosis, and Canadians are especially hard hit. Many end up wheelchair-bound. MS sufferers often have trouble to see, stand, even swallow. Now W5 has an exclusive first look at a radical new approach that suggests the disease is not just an autoimmune disorder, as has long been thought. A relatively simple procedure called the liberation treatment could free MS patients from a lifetime of suffering. A scientific breakthrough, but one inspired by love. Here is Avis Favreau.
Amid the medieval churches and castles in the ancient city of Ferrara in northern Italy is a doctor, Paolo Zamboni, who's developed an amazing theory that could turn the diagnosis and treatment of multiple sclerosis upside down.
I am fully convinced that it is very, very important for people.
Dr. Zamboni was trained as a surgeon, but a rare neurological disease left him unable to operate. But it was when his wife Elena began developing the symptoms of MS over a decade ago that he began a new and very personal medical mission. She was having serious attacks where she lost her sight and couldn't walk.
So did you see her spiraling down?
Yes. My hope was to find something that might be operated for her.
And this is what he was afraid would happen to her. These are Italian MS patients at a nearby rehab clinic. The disease has damaged their ability to move normally. It causes them chronic fatigue and vision loss. They say it's destroyed their independence.
I am one leg that I am not able to use, the foot too. This hand sometimes is terrible to write.
I can't use knife to cut meat. I can't wash alone. It's very depressing, you know.
You can't walk well?
No, I can't walk. I can just use the wheelchair.
Doctors have long considered MS an autoimmune disorder, where immune cells attack the nerves and brain. One of the hallmarks of the disease are these white spots that appear on brain scans, signs of active disease. But no one has ever conclusively proven exactly what starts it all.
For over a century, scientists have been finding unusually high levels of iron in the brains of patients with MS. Most assumed it was simply a byproduct of the immune disorder. But for Dr. Zamboni, it was a clue to something much more important.
For me, what's really unbelievable is to understand that iron deposits in multiple sclerosis are exactly around the veins. So probably is a product of a dysfunction of drainage of the vein. This is very important news because iron is very dangerous.
Dangerous because iron in the brain can cause cell death, inflammation, and immune problems. So using ultrasound, he began to scan the head and necks of MS patients, and that's when he made a key discovery.
In some patients, I found the evidence of narrowing of the vein.
In the neck?
Yes.
So the blood was not draining, and this is in an MS patient?
Yes, just in MS patients.
In patient after patient, he found the same thing, narrowed veins.
So in normal people or people with other diseases?
With other disease, neurological or not.
No narrowing?
No narrowing.
So every single one of the MS patients had some sort of narrowing in the drainage?
Yes.
It was a brand new condition, something he called CCSVI, chronic cerebral spinal venous insufficiency. He found blockages either in the two jugular veins or in a large central vein that sits in the chest, problems that he says likely take root before birth. And when they're narrowed or blocked, blood backs up into the brain, and that, he says, could be pushing blood which contains iron into the brain tissue of these patients. The bottom line, Dr. Zamboni had uncovered a structural defect common in MS patients that could be a possible trigger for multiple sclerosis.
Did you say, this is it? Did you jump up and down? Did you say,
yes,
this is it? This is something
This is a
see?
very important factor, I thought, and also that this factor can be treated.
Were you excited?
Absolutely excited. The first things that I did was to present my imaging to neurologists. And at beginning they were really interested, but when I anticipated the possibility to treat this associated condition, they were not so excited like me.
Dr. Zamboni says many neurologists he approached declined to join his research. That could be because it's a complete reversal of conventional science that says MS is a brain disorder and an autoimmune disease. Dr. Zamboni's work suggests MS may really be at its root a plumbing problem in the veins, with the possibility of a diagnostic test, perhaps even a treatment to unblock these malformed veins. But there was one neurologist who was captivated by the theory. Dr. Fabrizio Salvi likes ideas that are out of the box, and so he began sending his MS patients to Dr. Zamboni for testing. The images of narrowed or blocked veins, called strictures, were irrefutable.
Everyone can see what we found. Everyone can see the strictures.
And one patient he sent was Augusto Zeppi. Augusto had been suffering regular MS attacks for 9 long years, which left him with incredible fatigue and difficulty walking.
E tutto quello che stavo sognando per la mia vita adulta non sarebbe mai più potuto essere.
You thought your life was over. Finito.
Finito. Game over.
Game over.
When he was scanned, both of his jugular veins were 60 and 80% blocked. And so he became one of the first to undergo an experimental procedure to unblock those veins. It's a treatment that he says has restored him to health.
Mi sono dimenticato di essere stato malato.
Really? You don't remember what it's like to have MS?
Sto bene come stavo 15 anni fa, prima di ammalarmi. C'è stato un momento in cui io pensavo di non poter giocare a tennis con mio figlio e poterlo fare.
You can play tennis with your son now?
Cioè,
He gave you back your life, ti ha dato la vita.
Mi ha ridato una seconda vita, sicuramente.
This is the hospital Santa Anna, tucked in the middle of the picturesque town of Ferrara, Italy. And you're about to see something never shown before on television. It's an experimental treatment to open up the blocked veins that Dr. Paolo Zamboni and his team have been finding in patients with multiple sclerosis.
So you decided to move ahead with the treatment now that you had made the diagnosis, right?
Yes. Treatment of a narrowing could be a good way for eliminating iron depositions, so dangerous iron stores in the brain.
And MS patients like this young woman are lining up for his research studies. For years, doctors have used tiny balloons to open up blocked arteries. It's a procedure called angioplasty. Dr. Zamboni decided to try a similar treatment in patients with MS who have blocked veins.
Prendiamo l'iniettore, esatto.
Dr. Robert Galeotti, an interventional radiologist, threads a wire through the key veins that drain blood from the brain. Like most MS patients they've studied, she has 2 blocked jugular veins in her neck. You can see one on the scan.
Look at this section and look at this.
A narrowing.
A narrowing.
Yes.
There's a significant stenosis, because it's certainly more than 50%.
Doctors then send in a small balloon and inflate it. Once the balloon is removed, doctors watch as the blood begins to flow down normally from the brain.
Wow. No more narrowing.
The blood goes faster than before.
Dr. Zamboni's team has performed this surgery on 120 patients so far, some while the patients were having severe MS attacks, with dramatic results.
Sometimes it was unbelievable because they told us, now I have a normal sensation. I have a sensation of my hands. I have a sensation of my legs again. It's fantastic.
The doctors called it the liberation procedure, la liberazione, the Italian word for freedom, as the operation restored normal blood flow from the brain. For the patients, however, this liberation had an even more profound meaning.
Here is research video taken by Dr. Zamboni's team. It shows an MS patient before the procedure. His right leg is weak and shakes. This is the same man 2 weeks after a liberation treatment. Another patient who drags his right leg before the treatment. A month and a half after the liberation, he has a steadier gait. These are some of the first patients Dr. Zamboni's team has treated, speaking about their experience for the first time.
È un qualcosa di veramente straordinario, secondo me.
Siamo liberati proprio.
You're liberated.
Sì.
Paolo Ricomini has had MS for 8 years. He had 3 blocked veins that were opened 2 years ago.
Bravo.
Che ha continuato a migliorare. Prima camminavo, adesso cammino molto bene rispetto a prima.
Rosella Rampi was diagnosed in 2003. She had 2 blocked veins that were opened 2 years ago.
In una decina di giorni ho recuperato completamente tutta la forza nella gamba.
In an upcoming study of 65 patients with the most common form of MS, many saw a drop in the number of new brain lesions. And in the nearly 2 years following the surgery, 73% of patients had no more MS attacks.
In the first 2 years after the procedure, if you maintain no narrowing in your neck veins or chest veins, you do not have more attack. And you do not have more active lesion at MRI.
Maybe it's a placebo effect.
Patients can be very enthusiastic the first months, the first day after the liberation procedure. I think this can be certainly taken into account. But after 2 years,
the first neurologist to support Dr. Zamboni's work was Fabrizio Salvi.
But you don't think it's a cure?
I think that may be the cure for MS, but I have to be careful.
Most in the medical community haven't yet heard about what's going on in Ferrara, Italy. But among MS patients, Dr. Zamboni's work is the hottest topic on internet chat sites. That's how half a world away in Southern California, the first American patient came to be liberated. Jeff Beal, an Emmy Award-winning music composer, had been withering under the weight of his disease, battling crippling fatigue.
MS is more like this sort of like Chinese water torture, you know? I mean, just kind of like day in, day out, you know, and it's kind of like a slow slope down, you know, you know the end game's different for everybody, but you kind of know that you're trending down, you know.
Part of his MS was fatigue, terrible fatigue, in which he literally could not keep his eyes open.
His wife Joan spent hours scouring the internet for new treatments until the day she found Dr. Zamboni's work.
Literally, I think I screamed that day. And Jeff can tell you, I was running around the house. I was excited because here was finally something that made sense.
They convinced a local surgeon to test Jeff, and guess what? He had 2 blocked jugular veins. And so Jeff became the first person to be treated outside of Italy.
I remember during the procedure, they were sort of opening, when they were first opening up one of the jugular veins, I sort of felt like the lights went on, you know, in a way, you know, in a very dramatic way that I had not experienced really before. I said, this is interesting.
It's only 5 months after his treatment, and Jeff is feeling stronger.
Something's different here. Whether it was short-term or long-term, but there was definitely some sort of perceptible improvement, and that was incredibly encouraging.
Jeff was so excited to feel like himself again. He would get through the day and he'd be, I'm awake. And suddenly he's playing trumpet duets with Henry, and he's helping Henry with his homework, and he's awake. And there's this presence in the house that hasn't been there for 2 years.
But scientists elsewhere won't embrace this radical new approach until they do their own studies. So researchers at the University of Buffalo actually invited Dr. Zamboni and a group of his liberated Italian patients to collaborate on the largest study of its kind. The Buffalo team, headed by Dr. Robert Zavadinov, is now looking for over 1,000 MS patients from the U.S. and from Canada to scan their necks with ultrasounds and MRIs to find the twisted veins that may be at the root of MS.
The first step is prove that this is true and that it's more prevalent in MS patients than normal controls, which I can tell you immediately I believe it is.
For Buffalo neurologist Bianca Weinstock-Gutman, it's urgent research.
If this is proven correctly, it will be a very, very big discovery, because we'll completely change the way how we think about MS, how we'll put our treatment on it, and eventually we may see later on maybe other relation of these venous problems on other autoimmune disorders.
But MS societies in Canada and the U.S. have issued cautious statements, saying there's insufficient evidence to suggest that this phenomenon is the cause of MS, and they discourage patients from getting tested or seeking treatment. But Dr. Zamboni insists his study results will eventually win over skeptics in the scientific world.
The opposition was really big, but this was never important for me, because what I did was to continue to accumulate evidence.
And he has important allies here at McMaster University in Hamilton. Mark Hakey, a Canadian who also works at Wayne State University in Detroit, says he too is finding surprising narrowed veins in MS patients from around the world.
And this is the drainage?
That's the main draining vein, and then it gets very narrow, almost like a little hair running down here. That's bad.
And you saw that and you thought what?
I thought Zamboni is on the right track. I was very excited by this because I felt that our finding made sense. I think this is quite a paradigm shift.
And so he's setting up his own scientific study, encouraging MS patients to send him MRI scans of their heads and necks so he can build on Dr. Zamboni's findings.
The patients need to speak up and say, we want to have something like this investigated, at least at an early stage, to see if there is credence to this theory. Even if it's 10 or 20% of these people who can be helped, that needs to be investigated.
But the scientific world moves slowly, and Dr. Zamboni's research suggests the earlier patients are treated, the better the results.
MS is a progressive disease and strikes young people. So if we lose time, there are a lot of young people that progresses without possibility to get back. And this is very heavy for me, really.
But for Dr. Zamboni, this has always been more than a scientific quest. It's a journey fueled by love. His wife, Elena, developed MS over a decade ago, and she was one of his team's first test subjects.
Immediately. I tested my wife immediately.
And
I found the narrowing.
Elena was also one of the first patients who was liberated from those blocked veins nearly 3 years ago. An intensely private woman, she chose not to speak on camera, but told us she's not had an MS attack since.
In the MRI, we do not have actually disease activity. at all. And she returned to completely to their activity.
She's normal?
Yes. If you perform a neurological examination, you are not capable to find neurological deficit.
When you look at her now, what do you think? Do you think, I helped her?
What I think is this probably the best prize. The best prize of the research.
His best prize, and a gift that Dr. Zamboni now wants to share with MS patients around the world.
Dr. Zamboni's scientific paper on the liberation treatment will be published next week, sure to further the debate on his radical treatment for multiple sclerosis. Now, if you want to learn more about this story, you can go to our website at w5.ctv.ca. You'll find additional information, including useful links.
The edge of something new.
Yes.
Yeah.
I believe this because it's a really strong mechanism, because drainage is one of the main regulatory mechanisms for the life of the cell, for the life of the body. So it is very important to maintain drainage in the best effective way, as much as we can as physicians.
Right. Drainage. So then you feel this is a whole new way of looking at MS.
Absolutely.
No doubt about it.
No, I have no doubt about this, because I have enough proof from our preliminary study to be confident that this is a very important point as a causative, as a part of the causative element of this disease.
Okay. So about MS, is MS an autoimmune disease?
Yes, of course. We have proof that it is an autoimmune disease. What is very interesting to understand, and what is not known actually, is what is the trigger of an autoimmunity reaction. And I think that our theory is strong enough to support that one of the trigger of an autoimmunity reaction could be venous dysfunction.
Right. Has anyone ever proven the actual cause of MS prior to this? When you went looking backwards,
no.
Did you ever find anyone who said, okay, this is what starts the immune reaction? Did anyone ever say that?
No. There is no causative element with enough evidence to be identified as the trigger.
Did that bother you?
Sorry?
Ti è preoccupato che non c'era il causo?
This is one this is one of the main points at the beginning of my research, and so.
Which was what? One of the main questions that you had at the beginning was what?
I began this research because I was interested in multiple sclerosis, because my wife had multiple sclerosis. So I tried to understand more, and I didn't find good explanation of the causative element of autoimmunity disease and reaction. What I found in the old literature was an involvement of venous system, of the cerebral venous system in this disease.
Which means cerebral venous system means what? The blood flow through the brain?
Yes.
The coming in and going out?
There was the point that who attracted me very much was that the plaque of multiple sclerosis, that are the main lesion, have always a vein in their center. So it's a venocentric disease.
So those white lesions in the MRIs have a
spread,
vein in them?
Spread along venous vasculature of the brain, and the vein have a central position in the lesion.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
But what
Do
is
most doctors
interesting
know that?
Yes, but what is very interesting is that Charcot, who was the man who described it for the first time this disease, described the venocentricity in the first publication in the 19th century.
So they found something back then.
Yes. And also people from US prior to the Second World War described congestion in the vein in post-mortem studies. Right. And it was beautiful. The example of a Danish neurologist who followed up for the entire life their patient, and with great pietas, this is a Latin term, performed the post-mortem studies and found the history of the life of these patients. And the conclusion of Dr. Fogg was the MS progress in a sense opposite to the normal sense of venous circulation of the brain.
Which means simply?
Simply this, that the plaque develop countercurrent.
Backwards.
Yes. And this suggested me that probably the flow was opposite the normal physiological flow. And so I started for developing a non-invasive system.
Well, question, let me just stop you there. In relation to all of this were all those autopsies that kept finding iron in the brain. Lots of iron in patients with MS.
Yes.
Did you see that when you went looking in the history of it?
Yes.
And your question must have been, how does that iron get there?
Yes. I can solve you this very rapidly because for the entire my life I was involved in understanding venous function, because also in other part in this district of the body is not well known. And this attracted me from a speculative point of view. So I began very expert in venous hemodynamics and also in iron related tissue injury.
Iron injury.
What I found in the 27 years of my research was that iron deposit is increased by venous function impairment. So if you do not have a good venous drainage, you increase iron stores. And iron stores is very dangerous when they are too much.
Because
yes.
What does it do? What does too much iron do?
Yes, because we have a very good system for storing iron, a safe system. But when the store are too much, our system are not capable to manage iron in the tissue. And iron in the tissue can develop free radicals. Free radicals actually may kill everything is life around. It's a very dangerous system for aging tissue, but also for tissue injury.
So the two things, the brains of patients with MS were not draining blood.
Yes,
and there
iron deposition in the brain.
The two together.
Yes,
and
but the interesting thing was that iron deposits is mainly in the deepest part, so more difficult to drain part of the brain, exactly around the veins.
Oh, in the middle.
Yes.
Right in the middle of
in the middle part of the brain, exactly around the veins. And this, from the histology, the microscopy, was completely equal to what I found normally in any other district of the body when I have problem of venous function, or venous drainage.
And what did you say? Aha?
Yes.
You said
in
aha.
In my mind, this was an unbelievable evidence that further study were necessary to understand the link between venous function on one side and iron deposits on the other.
So what made you go look at people's necks?
Really, I do not investigate immediately the neck. What I found was that in the cerebral vein, in many cases, I found opposite direction of the flow.
You found the blood was going back up instead of draining.
No flow toward the heart, but flow with a chaotic displacement of blood in the brain, without possibility to empty. And at that point, I tried to investigate the neck. And this was unbelievable, because in the neck, I found blood coming from the chest and go again into the brain. And also, in some patients, I found directly by sonography the evidence of narrowing of the vein.
In the neck?
Yes.
So the blood was not draining?
It was not draining, was not passing regularly from the brain toward the heart.
And this is in an MS patient?
Yes, just in MS patient.
And then you started to test some more?
Yes.
What did you find?
At that point, I tested, probably this entire hospital was investigated for normal controls of different age. I used also patients with any kind of neurological disease for understanding this mechanism might probably make a role also for other disease, but I didn't find no connection.
So in normal people, or people with other diseases,
with other disease, neurological or not,
no narrowing.
No narrowing.
In patients with MS,
I found at the beginning a very high proportion, and by increasing my own learning curve, I was capable to find anomalies in blood flow in 100% of people.
So every single one of the MS patients had some sort of narrowing in the drainage veins.
And what is more important for me, and what we identified, was the physiology, the normality of the system and how the blood leaves the brain. We know exactly by a screening device like ultrasounds, we are capable to measure the physiology. And it's very interesting to know that physiology is present in any kind of disease, in any kind of people, except people with MS. So I think that this is a very strong evidence that anomalies in physiology of venous circulation.
There's some,
Yes.
In other words, in very simple terms,
it's a peculiar mechanism.
It's something different about MS, patients with MS.
Oh yes, it's absolutely different. My suggestion to physicians that want to test this is to perform at the beginning not investigation on MS, but to investigate normal people, 50, 100 normal people,
and see what
so to understand exactly what is the normal appearance. And after this little training, if you want to investigate MS people, immediately, you understand
You'll see
how it's different.
And this is what you called CCVSI.
Yes, I call CCSVI because
It's a new condition you found.
It's a new condition.
It didn't exist before.
No. This is a new vascular picture that was never described before.
Oh,
and sometimes it was unbelievable because they have the resolution of the symptoms, the feeling in the operatory table.
That it stopped.
Yes, and they told us, now I have a normal sensation. I have a sensation of my hands. I have a sensation of my legs again. It's fantastic.
Right away?
Yes, after a few minutes sometimes. Or maximum for acute attack. In the space of 24 hours, 48 hours.
Every patient?
Yes, every patient with acute relapse have a resolution without steroids in a very little space of time. And this gives us the conviction that venous narrowing plays a role. Because if you solve narrowing, the acute relapse, the acute attack of MS, immediately is solved. Mm-hmm. So certainly the narrowing is a part of the symptom.
Why did you call it liberation? You call it procedure liberation.
Liberation was really coined by the neurologist, Dr. Salvi, because I called him and I told, there are several narrowing, and we solved the narrowing. And the second time, he told me, do you liberate the patient from the narrowing? And so we called liberation procedure.
But it has another meaning, doesn't it?
Yes.
It has a bigger meaning.
Yes, because at the beginning, the term was to liberate from the narrowing. And after the first cases in relapse, in acute relapse, with resolution of the symptoms, this was used in the openness that this operation could be useful for liberation from the MS.
Good term. Good term.
Yes,
how many patients have you liberated?
Including also patients coming from US, there are actually 118 patients.
118.
Very important, because my first point was to demonstrate that a safe treatment can demonstrate us if venous function could help in managing the disease. So I prefer to use balloon because it's safe and can be also repeatable with a second shot, very usable without any danger for the patient, and is very conservative. This is a good model for understanding if venous function could play a role or not with the disease. And actually the answer is yes. Because if you have no narrowing, you have no more relapse. So this is very important.
Okay.
And also it's very important that in this category of patient, an index that integrate motor function in the lower and upper extremities and cognitive function also improve significantly.
Ascolta le sedie di sopra. Okay, and so that's relapsing remitting, so 2 years out, no attacks in the patients that you've done. All of them have had no attacks.
Sometimes I have a
re-narrowing.
If
they have an attack, it's usually because it's re-narrowed.
Just in re-narrowing, not in the other. And this is a very important proof, in my opinion, because this tell us that narrowing is linked with relapse.
What about primary progressive MS?
Primary progressive is the monster of the disease because actually they are completely orphan of any treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Primary progressive people do not have reliable drugs or treatment.
Nothing. And what did you find? You've done this on people with primary
progressive.
Yes,
we have a little group of patients in which we understand two main things. The first is that the distribution of the narrowing is completely different from the other. And this is very important because tell us that the location of the narrowing can determine the course of the disease.
Right.
And not all the narrowing of primary progressive people can be treated. Urgent for MS patients.
Urgent. Because?
Because MS is a progressive disease and strikes young people. So if we lose time, there are a lot of young people that progresses without possibility to get back. And this is very heavy for me, really.
Why?
Because I have a lot of people that email me, that wrote me, that call me, and also that knock to my door every day. And it's very hard for me to explain that there are no conditions for treatment, there is not enough awareness of CCSVI, there is no possibility to learn CCSVI screening because there are no course, no interest from the scientific society. So this means for the patients we are really on late. So this is the reason.
So let me just go over that. So you have people knocking on your door, you have people coming to you say, test me.
Yes.
And you can't.
I cannot.
And there are no places in the world really.
There is very few places because
that can test.
Yes, the publication that we are capable to do was really important because centers like Buffalo, Detroit, and Stanford are starting. So this is very important, but really are a drop in the ocean because we need to have more and more centers capable at least to perform the screening.
Your wife, when she got sick, what did you see happening to her?
This was really...
it's Elena, your wife.
Elena, yes, the first attack, very unclear at the beginning of the 90s. And the diagnosis and the real onset was in 95. And Elena had mainly two big attacks per year, a long time, and now is 5 years without attack.
But when she was sick, she was not able to walk, she was fatigued.
But to be honest, fortunately, she had always a good recovery. But
you were worried.
The daily activity was really devastated by the fatigue. Chronic fatigue was really strong for her.
So she was always tired, like like many MS patients.
Yes, this is a very disabling symptom, and is a symptom orphan of treatment. So you have fatigue is a part of disabilities because led to depression, and also if you are capable to do exercise, you do not have the willingness to do
it. And so, did you see her spiraling down?
Yes.
What did you think when you saw her?
At that point, I was very close to the discovery of CCSVI. And so my hope was to find something that might be operated for her. And when I found this, I immediately operate her. And she underwent two balloon shot, because have had restenosis, and I was aware of a restenosis prior to a new attack. So the second shot was done prior to further attack. And in the MRI, we do not have actually disease activity at all. And she returned to completely to their activity.
She's normal?
Yes. If you perform a neurological examination, you are not capable to find neurological deficit.
You cured your wife?
Yes.
Different. Important. I don't know how you...
This is the reason of my investigation, of my interest in MS, certainly.
You said she was your
motor.
motor.
It's a very good input, very strong input.
So the thought of your wife ending up in a wheelchair was pushing you forward?
No.
The fear.
Ellen had an MS relapsing remitting course with a very strong attack and with few symptoms like paresthesia or other symptoms in the daily activity and chronic fatigue. But certainly we were both aware that along this course you have certainly strong disability at the end of the course. So
when you look at her now, what do you think? Do you think, I helped her? Do you think, I don't know.
What I think is this probably the best prize. The best prize of the research.
You got
it's
your
the best fruit.
And it's been 5 years now.
Yes, it's 4 years.
4 years. That's good.
Oh, it's fantastic.
And now you want to bring this to other people.
Of course.
What's your hope?
My hope is really simple. Is to interest the neurological community, is to spread very rapidly the CCSVI screening methodology among MS center in the world, is to find support for a multi-center randomized controlled trial, and to prepare center in order to give a very good treatment, safe, to patients.